Welcome to episode 8 of Escape the Rat Race Radio. I'm your host, Christian Rodwell, and this is your ticket to escape the 9 to 5.
Because there's so many online instructors in the world today that just aren't willing to do the real work to get people the real results. They just want to publish something and forget about it, like a book. And that's not what it is. You know, if the book is the new business card, well, the online course has got to be the new book. Results take time. Like, actually building a business takes time. There's no shortcut to wealth. You know, you don't just flick a button and start making money, because the one law of affluence and abundance is that you have to provide service and solve problems in exchange for the money that you earn.
What is it that makes a successful online business? In this week's episode of Escape the Rat Race Radio, I've invited Brad Hart to share his experience of online marketing and helping many entrepreneurs create a successful business using the online space. What we'll talk about in this interview is that you must understand what makes business successful before you even begin to think about how to take that online. Understanding the fundamentals of a business, such as who is your perfect customer and why are they going to buy from you, are questions that you need to answer before you start looking at online marketing tactics and funnels and all of the cool things and exciting things that can be done now with the technology available to us. So Brad will share some really interesting stories as well of his adventures over the last few years. He's rubbed shoulders with some of the biggest names in the personal development space, and I know you're going to love listening to this interview. So let's not hold back. Let's head over now to our interview with Brad Hart. This week, I'm really pleased to have Brad Hart on the line. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
How you doing, man?
I'm well, thanks. I'm well. So it's
Awesome.
A little bit late where you are. It's a brand new day here in Boulder, Colorado. It's beautiful out, sunny, a little bit cool, but I love it.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Yeah, I was just going to ask you where in the world you are, because I know you've been traveling around a lot recently, haven't you?
That's right. Spent about 6 months on the road last year. Australia, New Zealand, France, Portugal, Spain. Spent a lot of time over in Europe. It's been really fun.
Yeah, good stuff. So Brad, we met pretty recently, really, and it was through the Entrepreneurs Institute online community, Roger Hamilton. And I know you've got some connections and friends within that community, and that brought us together. And I'm just, fascinated by all of the work you're doing, and you've got such a great story. I'd love you to just share with the listeners a little bit about your background and what you're really up to these days.
Sure. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. Thank you for listening. So, yeah, we met through Roger James Hamilton's mastermind. He wrote a book that changed a lot of things about the way I work with clients and teams. It is called Millionaire Master Plan, but he's also got a really great tool called Wealth Dynamics, which helps you find your flow as an entrepreneur. And I'm a supporter and you're a deal maker. And, we want to partner with people that balance out our strengths so that we could spend more time doing the things that really light us up and put us in flow. And then everybody wins, right? That's the make more marbles philosophy. I'd rather have a smaller piece of a much larger pie than 100% of nothing. So that's kind of what my whole thing in business. And, I started out, I didn't know the first thing about being an entrepreneur. I just knew that I didn't really fit into the rules as they were. So as time went on, I started doing more and more entrepreneurial things to make money. I started at 13 years old mowing lawns, and then I worked at a shooting range for a while, which was very physically intensive, but I made tips, and that was like a huge thing for me. And then I started working in restaurants and bars, and that was, again, I could see the effort and the service point of view. If I did better for people and I really paid attention to their needs, I get paid more. So there was a great correlation there. And then when I was older, I started doing real estate, in the city in New York. And what ended up happening was I learned sales and marketing. Like, I really learned it for the first time. I really understood what it took to build something from nothing, right? So I did that for a couple of years up until about 24, and things were going okay. But then my dad passed away. It was this kind of turning point in my life. And up until then, I think like most young people in their 20s or 30s, they don't really have a taste or touch of mortality. And I had two in a very short period of time. My best friend also had passed away in college from relations and complications to alcohol. I didn't quite get the message then, but over time, it really started to sink in. It's like I had to, make a shift, and I had to serve more people, and I had to leave a legacy that I could really be proud of, because I didn't know how much time I had. So that led to a great number of other things. But I think the thing that I learned the most from that experience was that, hey, like, if you have a dream, if you have something that is burning inside of you, that's there for a reason. And, if you can go and take that dream and really work towards it and create a reality around it and start to really ask for it, it'll start to come into your life. And that's not like a woo woo pseudoscience type of thing, but it's really true. Like if you start shaking the branches, things will start falling out of the tree, right?
Mm.
So for me, moving through life, and I've done a great many things at this point, but I think everything that I've ever got involved with business has been always people focused. And that's been my strength. And that's where I always go to, and some people are better with numbers and some people are better, at creating new products or ideas. But, my number one value add has always been people. And I've always sought to build my businesses around people.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And obviously you touched on the wealth dynamics, and that really helps you understand that business is just really dealing with people, that's what it comes down to. And where do you think things would have gone, Brad, if obviously you didn't have those two very difficult moments kind of earlier on in your life that you just mentioned on? Do you think you would have just continued in that same, 9 to 5 lifestyle that you're in?
I wish it was 9 to 5, Chris. It was like 7 to 7 or 8. But yeah, I was working hard. I was making decent money, but that was the first moment when I really realized, like, hey, what, my actions have consequences in this world, and I don't really know what I'm meant to do, but I have a feeling it's not this forever. So that was like the first time I was really like shaken awake, if you will. Like it's really easy to put your head down and start drifting. And for me, I could have drifted for a very long time. I might have woken up eventually, but that was a moment where it was like clear and catalyzed in my mind. Like, hey, there's bigger things that require your attention in this world. You can't just keep, grinding it out every day. Although I was helping people, it wasn't the best and highest use of what I felt my talents were, and I kind of settled for a lifestyle which was good, but not great. And I think that's something that happens to a lot of people. So when you're confronted with those hard decisions in life, I think if you want to really be your best, you got to look at what you could be, right? You got to look at your potential and the highest use and best use of your talents, ways to grow and contribute beyond yourself and help more people, because that's really where you're going to find, I think, the juice that gets you to that next level.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think for a lot of people that are currently maybe listening to this podcast and they are stuck in that daily grind, they know that there's a bigger calling, a bigger reason and a bigger purpose out there. But a lot of times it's the fear that holds people back. So maybe the fear of, where's the money going to come from? I don't know the necessary skills. So how did you kind of change from that employee mindset to actually becoming the entrepreneur that you are today? And what were those early steps? How did you start kind of exploring different pathways?
Yeah, it was actually kind of a mix of things. But I think the thing that really woke me up was just understanding what it took to provide a service in exchange for money, right? Because that's what all business is. And people, we talked a little bit about this before the call. People want to make money online, for example. That's a really big buzzword these days. But what they don't realize or seem to realize, maybe they do and they're just not willing to take action towards it, is that it's really just a leveraged way to impact and influence more people, right? Or to serve more people, or to solve the problems of more people. So if you could do that for one person, you could do that for a million, theoretically, with the right systems and support in place. But you have to start somewhere. And many people start building products or trying to perform services online before they ever really get good at serving the needs of a client in person, right? So maybe the best way to start would be to take a step back and say, how can I serve one human being, right? And that's my primary question, right? Whenever I talk to somebody new, I'm always thinking, like, how can I leave this person better off than I found them, right? What do they really need? And what could I help them provide? And even if it's not me, right? Maybe it's a link or a book or a resource or a connection, but what is the solution to their pain? And the more I go through life, the more of these little solutions I collect. And the more times I've steered people in the right direction, you get more confident in your ability to do that. And that's a huge value add. Imagine meeting somebody that changes your whole life just because they know the next thing you need, right? And that's not coming from a place of ego. It's just practice, I think. If you really have that as a value added first thing, if you're always putting your best foot forward, you can change it around very quickly. So I think that's kind of where it comes from.
And you've clearly cultivated a real strong mindset and foundations in personal development there, Brad. And I know that you've mixed in that world quite extensively. I've seen pictures of you traveling with people like Tim Ferriss and Neil Strauss. I mean, how did all that come about?
Here's a funny story. When I was, a young kid, I grew up in a neighborhood where, I wasn't let out of the house very much when I was a kid. And my mom was very protective. And, eventually her and my dad split up and he had his own issues. But, I stayed and I lived with him. And I was very independent. He couldn't really look after me the way that most fathers or parents would. And, I was left to my own devices. So the first thing I did is I went outside and I started to try to make friends, but I didn't have any social skills. So the first thing that the bigger kids did was line me up next to the house and take turns kicking me in the crotch as hard as they could. And that was their fun game for the day. And I was the new kid, so there I was, right? And that was traumatic, obviously. That was the first moment when I realized, hey, something's not right here. But it also, from that pain, kind of put me on a quest. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm going to figure out how to relate to people and figure out how to befriend people. And I spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth in between groups of people and groups of kids and like, trying to befriend the bigger kids so I wouldn't get picked on so much because I was always younger. I was always smaller and I was always, or at least in that time, I wasn't really up to speed yet with the rest of these other kids who had been hanging out with each other for years. I was the outsider. So that was one piece. And then as time went on, I started to realize that, hey, like there's an actual talent here. Like I'm actually getting good at making people laugh or, befriending people. And that's kind of where that came from for me. But I think, as I got older, I still wasn't very good around women. There weren't a lot of women in my life. And, towards the end of high school, that started to become pretty painful. I went to a very small Catholic school and it was the same 30 kids from like grade 8 through grade 12. So the dating choices were pretty much, slim to none. And I remember reading a book called The Game, which had just come out at the time. And if you've ever heard of this game, you might, know the author, Neil Strauss. And at that time, that book was a revelation to me because I had zero idea how to talk to women. I didn't want to be like a crazy pickup artist or anything like that. Like, I just wanted to be able to talk to a girl and like have like a real conversation that wasn't like, I'm her buddy, right? I wanted to have like an actual man and woman conversation with a female. And up until I read that book, I really had no idea how to do that. I didn't even know that was possible to just walk up to somebody of the opposite sex and just start a conversation and be interesting and interested. So that really opened up a bag of marbles for me. And I ended up reading that book and a couple others he had written. And lo and behold, a few years later, I'm on a plane on my way out to meet Neil Strauss at an event. And we became, more close. And over the years, we kind of developed a friendship. When he started his group, like a little mastermind group called The Society, which wasn't focused on pickup, was more like being the best version of yourself. So it was a men's group, started as 50 people in his house in Malibu. And, kind of went along like that. It went from 50 to 100 to 1,700 people worldwide. And now I have friends in almost every major city around the world as a result of that. But it all came, again, from that sense of pain and loss and suffering as a young kid of wanting to belong. And I think that was really a piece. So some funny stories is like, things come around full circle. Right? When you end up traveling with people like that, you get a little bit more into their world. And Neil and I are still friends. We don't talk every day or anything like that. But, I think one of the conversations we had actually led him to decide to stop chasing women all the time and actually get married, which is a really fun story. So, I like to tell the story of when we're in Machu Picchu and we're hiking the Inca Trail, and it's myself and Alex, rest in peace, he passed away since, and Neil, and we're hiking because it was supposed to be 8 people, but 5 of them couldn't show up at the very last minute. So here we are, these 3 guys, and we have 13 porters that are supposed to take care of this big group of 8. So we're being treated like the Incan gods, like being carried basically through these mountains. These guys are just throwing our backpacks over their shoulders and running up the hill. They have calves the size of boulders. They got our camp set up and broken down at the end of the day. You want to feel like an entitled person for a minute? Like that's one way, right? But, we got to talking, and Neil is, telling me about all the struggles that he's had with kind of this identity he's built around himself. And, we just had this conversation to the extent of, hey, man, like you've proven that you can do this. You could be with anybody you want to be with. At this point, it's just more of the same. So what's the next step for you? I mean, do you want to have kids? He's like, yeah, of course. I'm like, well, you got about, do you want to be that guy who's like 70 years old and he's at his kid's high school graduation? He's like, no, of course not. I'm like, well, you got about 4 years to figure that out. And he's like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, man, like, none of us are getting any younger. Maybe this girl you're with, Ingrid, who turns out to be his wife, and they have a beautiful son. I think they have a second baby on the way even. Now they're married and they're happy and everything's going really great. So I'm not saying I'm the only one, but I was definitely a person at that time in his life where I helped him tip over the edge. And had he never written that book, I would have never thought about him, met him, or helped him in that stage of his journey. But that's kind of how life works. It's like, you give and you get. And it's this really fun kind of thing. Like I could have never planned, but it changed my whole life. And I think it changed his as well. Neil was introduced to me, or at least the concept of being in that group was introduced to me by Tim Ferriss in Africa. So they were setting up, I was there in Africa. Tim had just wrote his second book, and he put out this thing called The Land Rush, right? Which is really cool. And if you bought 1,000 books, you'd take on any of these crazy trips to India or Argentina or Africa. I was like, well, I've never been to Africa. I don't know when I'm going to get to go again. So I'll spend 10 days in Africa with one of my heroes. That sounds amazing. So I call up Charlie Hone, who was his assistant at the time, and Charlie's gone on to do some amazing things on his own. He's having a baby, actually. So congratulations, Charlie, if you're listening. But yeah, it was Tim and Charlie and I. We went out to Africa, to Kenya and Tanzania. We stayed with Lila Jana and the folks over at Samasource, who do a really wonderful job of connecting people to work opportunities out there. So we're out there, and for 10 days, we toured the Serengeti, and we went to Nairobi. We played golf with the president and the general of Kenya. They're like, they're yelling at us in Swahili because we're terrible at golf. We're like, play through. Nobody can understand anybody. It was hilarious. Stuff like that. It was just a lot of fun memories. But, the thing with Tim, and I think a lot of, he's become almost like this mystical figure in the personal development world. He's a regular guy, he's got a lot of real high talents and, highly functioning adult. And what I think is, if you can really hone in like Tim has on what you're great at, you can be just like Tim. You won't look like Tim, and you may not do the same types of things as him. But if you really hone in on those talents, that was the first time it really opened up for me. So that was a piece. And then I got the opportunity to meet Richard Branson around the same time, about 2 months before. And we're in Miami, and I'm really excited at the time about 3D printing. Like, I'm really excited right now about solar and battery technology. And it's one of the reasons I want to partner with Tesla. We're having this conversation in this small little group at a charity event, the Versace Mansion. And Richard comes in, and he's working the room, and he's talking to everybody. He's asking everybody their story. And I could see that he's visibly nervous. And I'm thinking to myself, this billionaire, this rebel billionaire, I've read all his books. I know all about his journey from nothing to where he is today. $5 billion, owns an island. You've heard the stories. I mean, hot air ballooning around the global lunar, it's crazy. And, to think somebody like that is not as extroverted and crazy as you think, like that really humbled me a little bit. I'm like, wow, well, if he can talk to people and be interested and interesting, so can I. And we got to talking about 3D printing, and he had never heard of it before. I told him about all the things that I thought it was able to do, and he got really excited. He said, hey, email me about that. I want to talk to you about that. I said, okay, billionaire investor Richard Branson, I'll email you. Who the hell am I? And I didn't get his email from him. So I go to his handlers just after the party. I said, oh, Richard, he said to email him. And they said, who the hell are you? We're not giving you his email. And I'm like, oh, man, that's a bummer. But it taught me, this guy was interested in my ideas. So then I got to write in Forbes about it and a couple other things. And I just you get these little kind of notions and inklings that, hey, maybe I have something to contribute beyond myself. Maybe my voice matters too. And my ideas have some validity and weight too. And I'm not saying that your story will mirror mine or look like mine exactly, but just look for those instances in your life when you have been validated, and never, ever forget in those times of despair or when you're down on yourself or do you think you're worthless, because we all have those, myself included. Everybody does. That's a human experience, right? We need to know the darkness in order to know the light. But just remember, you matter, and you can make those differences, and people care about what you have to say and think. And the more you work at something and the better you get at it, the more impact you'll have ultimately. And the domino effects and the ripple effects in life will never cease to amaze you and what can come around to you.
The difficulties that people who maybe read a book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad or the 4-Hour Work Week, and they suddenly just realize that there is a completely different life. There's a whole new way that things can be done, but their surroundings, maybe the friends and family, they're not on the same wavelengths often. And it's very difficult for people to realize those dreams, and which is why it's so important that we hold, monthly meetups. And you mentioned about the mastermind groups that you've joined there, but it's so important, isn't it, to surround yourself with people who are on a similar journey, because there will be ups and downs along the way. And you need that support from others around you just to keep telling you, look, you can do it. Just keep going.
Yeah, and I knew I never fit in, right? That was my story for so long. Oh, you don't belong. These kids don't like you, or they're going to leave you, or she's going to leave you. That just kept coming up and over and over and over again. Eventually I realized, holy crap, it's me. I don't fit in because I'm not really allowing myself to feel the love and the generosity and the care of humans. And yeah, some people are going to mess you up sometimes and do selfish and stupid things, but it's not about you. Right? It was never about you. So you can always be your best self and put your best foot forward. And in aggregate, you shouldn't have any fear about failing, right? Not every one thing needs to work out in order for you to have an exceptional life. And I think abundance is really understanding that is you can have so much going on in your life that all of your needs are taken care of and then some. And it's not up to any one situation or person or deal or business or whatever to make it happen for you individually.
Yeah. And for someone who is thinking about starting their own business, failure is just part and parcel of that journey, and taking no's is something you've got to get used to, isn't it?
Exactly. I have this painter friend named Blake Jameson, and he's a real inspiration to me. He's actually the reason I started my weekly video show. And Blake did this thing that was really just incredible at the time. It's called 90 Days to MoMA, like the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. So his goal was in 90 days to become from an unknown artist, and he has a real talent at doing graffiti art, to being in the San Francisco MoMA. And it chronicles his daily journey towards that goal. And he didn't quite make it, but he got a lot of press and recognition. And some of the things he did was really cool. I actually bid on a couple of his artworks, and I gave them to two of my best friends, Mike and Sean. And the artwork was the saying, "I can never fail. I can only win or learn." I thought that was just so pertinent for an entrepreneur. It's like, you can't fail, right? There's no failure. You got to erase that from mind. You can only win or learn. And every time you learn, you get that much closer to winning, right? Every time you step up to the plate, you get a little bit better. And even the best hitters in the world, the Babe Ruth, still strike out 70% of the time. So don't compare yourself to the people who, have the wins, because it's an echo chamber, right? You only see the wins because that's what people show you. But they have just as many failures, if not more. For every Facebook, there's 10,000 people who tried.
So, Brad, let's fast forward a little bit, because I'd really like to find out a bit more about what you're doing now in terms of the online marketing company that you have, which is Market Your Course. And you partnered, maybe you can explain about your partnership with Miguel Hernandez, who's people might recognize his name from Udemy. So how did all of that come about, and what are you guys up to at the moment?
So Miguel's a really special guy. I mean, he's already been very successful in a lot of ways. He started Grumo Media a while ago. That's actually how he broke into the scene. He started making these really fun little demo videos for Silicon Valley startups. He actually sent one unsolicited to Alexis Ohanian at Reddit, who had this new company called Hitmonk. And he just did it out of love. He's just like, "Hey, use this if it's useful to you." It was this short little cute 2-minute video that was dubbed by him that, basically explained what Hitmonk was. And they loved it. It went like wildfire throughout the whole company. And then, that led to him being introduced to 500 startups and having all these amazing experiences. So Grumo Media, like almost overnight, became $1 million demo video company for companies like Microsoft and Walmart and Silicon Valley startups. He even get to work with celebrities like Ashton Kutcher. So that was his first big success. And then, people were asking him for a demo video, but they couldn't afford his rate, right? He was charging quite a bit. So he decided, I'm going to make an online course, right? So he made an awesome online course. It's called How to Create an Awesome Demo Video. And that was really successful as well on a new platform at the time called Udemy. And since it was successful, they were putting a lot of money and time and resources behind him. So he became one of the top selling online course creators. So, when you start making chorizo and people love chorizo, you start churning out more chorizo. And there you go. He had 10 online courses within no time. I think he has 10 now with over 500,000 in sales or more. And he has over 20,000 students, nearly 1,000 positive reviews on Udemy. So, as far as Udemy goes, that's like, he's one of the top people, top 100 for sure, if not top 50 of all time in sales and everything else. So across all metrics, you would consider him successful. So what we decided to do together, and I'll tell you how we got to be linked up, was I met a guy named Dan Martell. Dan Martell is the founder of Clarity and a couple other companies. And he's a great guy. He's become a little bit of a mentor to mine. Dan is one of these guys who's also a star and a connector, and he invited us up to his house. And what happened was, he lives in Moncton, New Brunswick, which is very far east. It took me 3 flights from New York to get there. It's in a whole nother time zone. I never knew where Moncton was, right? So I'm on the second of 3 layovers. I think I'm in Ottawa somewhere, right? And I'm in the airport and I'm kind of hanging out. And I get an email from Udemy. It says it's, $10 sale day or whatever. Like they're doing a flash sale, $10 courses. So I'm like, that's great. So I buy a course called How to Create an Awesome Online Course. And I start looking at it. I say, this is cool, $10. All right, great. And I get back on the plane and I forget all about it. That night at dinner, we're in Dan's house and we're going around the table and we're talking to everybody. Hey, what do you do? Where are you from? How do you know Dan? Miguel says, well, I'm a Udemy instructor. I said, I just bought my first course on Udemy today. And I said, he says, which one is it? I said, it's How to Create an Awesome Online Course. He's like, wait a second, who's it by? I'm like, let me look, Miguel Hernandez. He's like, that's my course. I'm like, no way. There's no way in the world that's your course. I just bought this today. It's my first Udemy course. He's like, that's my course. I'm like, dude, this is too crazy to be a coincidence. There is an absolute certainty in my mind right now that we're going to end up doing something together. Like, this is too crazy to be a coincidence. So time passed. He's like, yeah. We kept talking. One day he came to me and he had some issues with negotiating contracts. So I walked him through it and I just reminded him, like, hey man, we should work on something together. What do you got cooking? And, it started out as like, we're going to create a course together. And then it became this whole marketing thing. And we realized that we needed to teach other people this. And it just kind of ballooned and spiraled from there. So it's been a really interesting year of learning all the ins and outs of marketing at a high level. And I've been doing it for a little bit longer, but he really brought a new, fresh kind of perspective to it. And I think we both learned that marketing in general, the state of marketing, is in a bad place. Like, people, it's just gotten to the point where they know the buttons to push and they know exactly how to get people to take action. But the value that they deliver can never live up to the hype that they establish. So it's not any one person's fault, right? Because people won't buy unless you put them in an emotional state to do so. But also people have to be able to control their emotions and realize what's hyperbole and what isn't, right? They have to realize at the same time, like results take time. Like actually building a business takes time. There's no shortcut to wealth. You don't just flick a button and start making money, because the one law of affluence and abundance is that you have to provide service and solve problems in exchange for the money that you earn. And if you're not solving somebody's problem at a high level, then guess what? You're not going to make a lot of money. So that's really the key lesson to learn there is you can be the best marketer on the planet, but if you don't provide value, you're going to get found out pretty quick.
Yeah, it's the fundamentals, isn't it? It's, what's the big problem out there that needs solving, and really understanding who your client is and what those challenges are that they face. And as you say, if you don't have that in place, then, you can't even begin to really think about the whole online side of stuff. So, Brad, what's a kind of insider tip? You are at the top of your game in terms of online marketing. What's really working out there at the moment? Because we hear all this hype about Facebook advertising, but, that's been around for quite a long time now. And webinars. So what's working for your clients at the moment?
I have the great fortune, I wouldn't call myself the top, but I certainly surround myself with the top people, people that routinely do 2, 3, 5, 10, I've seen $15 million launches of online products, which is just staggering when you think about it. For a small team to be able to kind of turn that type of revenue, that's just the world we live in now. For me, I think what's working the best is authenticity, right? It's over delivering of value, right? I think people can buy any number of online courses. They can buy any number of products or services, but the more you can provide as close to bespoke of a solution as you can, the better off you'll do. So case in point, we sell a course on how to validate, create, and market online courses. Our price point's about $1,000. Danny Inney sells a course that's very much the same, but it's $3,000. What's the difference? Well, the difference is Danny Inney has 30 people on his staff that will coach you as much as you want, no matter what. We can't afford to do that at $1,000. We could jump on the calls here and there. We have a Facebook group. We do calls every week or so if people need help. But at the end of the day, there's just no way I could charge that little and have that kind of bandwidth and still be able to serve people at a high level. So, just depending on what you need, there's a product for it. And I think when you create a service or an offering, you have to take the very best of what you've learned dealing with clients one-on-one and create a solution that really fits what people need and want and desire. Because the number one thing we have that's an obstacle for people getting to their online course goals is that they don't understand what all goes into it and how an online course really needs to be so polished that somebody can get the result that you promise without any involvement that you have, which takes time to really get there, and it takes a lot of testing and prep work. So that's one piece. And then the other side, they haven't really taken the time to understand what people get stuck on and need the most help with in order so that they can put out the right messaging and the right service so that people get that problem handled. Right? So it really has nothing to do with marketing tricks. It's really, what are you offering that people can really get behind? And once you have that, you can start to attract people. And once you can start to attract people, you can scale up indefinitely. But it's getting that first group, right? That I call them the beta or the pilot or the, whatever you want to call it, to really buy into the getting that result and walking them hand to hand to get to that result. And then using their testimonials, their case studies, their referrals to really grow like a groundswell around it. Because there's so many online instructors in the world today that just aren't willing to do the real work to get people the real results. They just want to publish something and forget about it, like a book. And that's not what it is. If the book is the new business card, well, the online course has got to be the new book. People need to take them more seriously. It used to be a book was a really big undertaking. You had to be qualified to write a book. Nowadays, anybody can put out a book. Anybody can put out an online course for that matter. It doesn't make it good.
Yeah, that's it. The technology is moving so quickly these days. And I know that you're a real big fan of future tech. You've already mentioned about solar and 3D printing. Mm-hmm. Where do you kind of see the online marketing moving forwards in terms of technology over the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
2 words, artificial intelligence, 1,000%. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think when we get to a place where everybody can have a bespoke experience because they're dealing not with a pre-programmed flowchart type of software or person or prepackaged course, but an actual machine learning software that can give you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, 24/7, as much as you want, then we're really into a new realm of things. And then also virtual reality, right? So between those two technologies, imagine entering a virtual space where you could relive or experience anything that you needed to learn or unlearn in your life, any traumatic experience, for example, that you wanted to relive and get clear about or really just, complete for yourself, or any educational experience where, think about the Matrix where, they download information like I know Kung Fu or I can fly a helicopter now. What if we really had that, and not so much like that, but had the simulation ability to put people in zero harm situations where they had no risk of downside and really be able to learn and move and break things in real time whenever they wanted in a dynamic environment where they could learn whether they needed to. And it's visually stimulating and it's auditorially stimulating. Eventually we'll have tactile sensation. I think video games are going to be a huge part of what goes on in the future, and not just kids sitting behind tapping buttons, but actually getting out and getting a workout in those simulations. So education is just burgeoning into a place where it no longer matters what your learning style is. It no longer matters who the teacher is, because we can collectively upload, let's say, the wisdom of humanity and use really smart artificial intelligence to deliver it in a way that's perfect for that person's actual needs. And it learns as they learn. I think that's fascinating.
That reminds me of Roger Hamilton recently talking about, really the importance of building communities now and experiences. And I think what you've mentioned there is just really giving people just that unbelievable experience to really remember and learn. Things are so exciting right now. It's just,
it's really an incredible time to be alive. And it's only speeding up. I mean, 8 years ago, we didn't have supercomputers in our pockets, and now we do. It's an incredible time to be alive.
Okay, so Brad, we're going to move on now to the quick fire round, and there's just a bunch of questions here. I'm just going to hit you with these questions and want to get your first answer on these. So drum roll for our first one, which is daily discipline. So what's the one habit or activity that keeps you focused and on the path every day?
So lemon water first thing with salt, pink Himalayan sea salt is a really great way to get the day started and get your endocrine system going. As far as staying focused, I write everything down on a little executive notepad. So I literally carry this around. And what I've gotten better at doing is anytime something comes into my knee, I got to do that. I just write it down. Like take a second, write it down. Okay, cool. And then back to whatever it's doing, because it interrupts me less and it breaks my pattern less. Because once you get interrupted, it can take you sometimes 15, 20 minutes to get back into flow. So now I've just gotten better at like whatever comes into my purview, I just write it down and come back to it.
Next up, rejection recall. So every entrepreneur has experienced bumps in their journey. Can you recall the biggest rejection or low point in your business, and how did you bounce back from that?
Oh God, so many. I mean, I've failed more times than I've succeeded, that's for sure. I was pretty bummed out when I had a company, and I actually, this turned into a legal thing, so I can't even talk about who it is, but we had a company when I moved out to Los Angeles. I moved there. We started making some real traction. We hired people. We started moving forward. And just one day, the founder kind of just up and rolled up shop and just decided to go off and do his own thing. And I felt hurt and I felt lost. And a lot of my money was tied up in it, and a lot of other people's money was tied up in it. And I just learned, like, you can do your very best in a situation. It doesn't mean it's going to work out best. So you really need to be able to pick your partners well and also see the obvious red flags. And then I think the other lesson I learned from that is, as much as possible, always have checks and balances inside a company so that nobody can just, take the money and run, so to speak.
Okay. Next up, what's happening? So what's the one app you have recently discovered which you can recommend to all of us?
For me, the app that I use probably the most is Evernote. I don't know if that qualifies or if it's sexy, but I use it all the time. I love Evernote. I use Scannable to scan all my notebooks. I think it's great.
Okay. And the final one in this round is Enter the Mentor. So we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our mentors. What would be your advice, Brad, for our listeners in finding the right mentor? And do you have mentors at the moment? And how did you go about finding them?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. I was actually speaking to my speaking coach about it this morning. A guy named Thomas Blackwell. He's one of the top Infusionsoft salespeople and just an incredible speaker. You can check him out at thomasblackwellspeak.com. And what he told me is that, it might take 10,000 hours to get mastery of something, but honestly, if you have a mentor or you have somebody that can guide you through it and kind of, you can model that person, it might be 500 hours, right? 10,000 hours is just for stubborn people that don't want to get the help that they need to really get where they're going. So yeah, I would say that, I'm always hiring coaches, wonderful people in various different aspects of my life for different things. And, you'd be surprised at how cheap some of these people's time actually is if you, consider it, the value that you can get from it. It's worth paying people a couple $100 for an hour of their time because they can make something so difficult, so simple, so quickly. And I think people are averse to spending their resources, monetarily especially, because they have this scarcity mindset. But like, what's the value of your life, right? You can't take money with you. You can't eat it. Like time is all you got. So I'm happy to pay somebody a little bit of money to get a lot of value and to move faster towards my goals.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Brad, we're coming towards the end of the interview. I can't believe it all just goes so quickly. And I was loving listening to your stories. I'm sure you've got heaps more. Would you like to just let people know how they can get in touch with you? And I know you've got a new TV show, which I've been absolutely loving. So that's definitely something people need to go and check out. But if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Christian. So I can be found pretty easily on the interwebs. I am at facebook.com/Brad Hart, Bradhart. If anything that you've heard in this interview struck a chord with you, if you have any questions or you're like, hey, I just want to say thank you for that. Cool. Hit me up there. I'd love to chat with you. That's one way. MikeMoreMarbles.com, MakeMoreMarbles is my main site. That's where I talk about productivity, business, finance, life. I'm running my hedge fund, all kinds of things on there, personal development. And then I go do marketing and online course type stuff at marketyourcourse.com. And that is a little joint venture with Miguel and I. So if any of those are exciting to you, I look forward to seeing you guys. There's plenty of free stuff, downloads, guides, productivity, alcohol, marketing, sales, anything you could possibly think of. So just, pop your email in. I won't spam you. You can grab any of that stuff if you like.
Yeah, no, awesome stuff over there. So just the final thought then, Brad, for people who are listening to the podcast, they're regular listeners and they're in that 9-to-5 office job. They know they want to get out. They're hating it and they're just being held back. There's something that's stopping them. What's that final piece of advice that you would give them?
Being an entrepreneur isn't for everybody. That's maybe the dream that a lot of people have. But a great way to start is by being an intrapreneur. So what's that? An intrapreneur is an employee or somebody that works for a company that just literally picks their head up from their desk every once in a while, doesn't just do what they're told, but looks for ways that they can add more value and solve more problems within an organization based on their strengths and skill sets, right? So if you're a really good people person, creating a better way to communicate between teams and partners or sharing resources and learning. If you're a really good numbers person, maybe you have a better system or way to save money. If you're really good with, creating products and ideas, maybe there are good things that you could take from customer feedback and help implement into products and services going forward. But, if you're willing to do that, your people will take notice, your team will take notice, your organization will take notice, and you will thrive as a result. And then if you like doing that type of thing and you have the resources to do so, for the endless tuition you'll end up paying as an entrepreneur, right? You're going to make a lot of mistakes. Then you can start to dip your toe out of the water, doing side projects, and eventually maybe starting your own business. But I think most people would do better by keeping their day job and then looking for ways they can expand and grow while having that stability as well.
Fantastic advice there, Brad. I wish you all the best in your mission to go and change the world. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for being a guest on Escape the Rat Race Radio.
Thank you, Christian, so much. And thank you for everybody who invested time with us today. We really appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you online.
Cool. Take care, Brad.
All right. Take care, Ryan.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brad Hart and his message about over-delivering and being authentic, taking what you know and finding out what are the common pains and problems, and then start small. Start testing your idea with a beta group and create your online course from the testimonials and the feedback that you receive once you have tried and tested that product and know that you can deliver on your promise. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to episode 8 today. And if you enjoyed the interview, then please spare 2 minutes to go into iTunes on your phone and search for Escape the Rat Race Radio. Then click the image and you'll see the reviews where there'll be an option to leave us a 5-star rating and positive review. You can also find the full show notes from today on Escape the Rat Race website, which is www.etrr.online, and all of the links that have been mentioned in today's show and ways to get in touch with Brad. And if you've got any feedback regarding today's episode or specific questions that you'd like to answer on future episodes, you can get in touch with me directly by emailing chris@etrr.online. So that's it from me. Remember to live your life with purpose and passion, and don't let anybody tell you that something isn't possible. Until next time, have an amazing week. To fast track your escape out of the 9-to-5, you can join our private Facebook group by either searching for Escape the Rat Race within 12 months or by heading to the official Escape the Rat Race website over at www.etrr.online/Facebook.